Boldwood presents Sleepwalker, written by M.A. Hunter and read by Paul Panting. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Chapter 1. Now. How has it come to this? The boat continues to bob in time with the sound of waves crashing against the bow. Ahead of us is nothing but a wall of white, the fog fully encompassing the whole vessel now. I don't envy the captain of the MS Oldenburg, having to navigate through this. I can only hope there is state-of-the-art navigational equipment in use. But looking at the rusted bench frames and chipped paint of the well-trodden walkways, it's hard to imagine anything modern exists on board. Affectionately referred to as the old and buggered, the MS Oldenburg is a ship that was built in the 1950s, and according to the pamphlet I'm clasping, crosses from Bideford and Ilfracombe to Lundy Island 3 times a week. The 12-mile trip should take us just short of 2 hours, and as far as any of the other passengers are concerned, Detective Fay, Max and I are just 3 acquaintances making the trip from Ilfracombe. I'm grateful Fay didn't cuff me before we boarded. It doesn't feel real. None of it does. Less than a month ago, Lucy and I were talking about booking a holiday abroad, somewhere warm with a pool, and food that our 5-year-old daughter Sienna wouldn't fuss about. Lundy Island couldn't be further from that dream. And none of us would ever have imagined I'd be standing trial for murder. I look over at my brother, Max. Over 6 feet tall, he inherited male pattern baldness from Dad's side of the family in his early 20s, and now keeps the top of his head fully shaved, a means of exercising what little control over it he has left. I want to ask him for the umpteenth time if this is all just a nightmare from which I seem unable to wake, a bad practical joke that has been taken too far. As angry as I would be to find myself the butt of the joke, I would give absolutely anything for Lucy to still be alive. Whilst this feels like a waste of everyone's time, Max assures me it buys him extra time to find Lucy's real killer. So much blood. Like something out of a horror movie. Those were the words of the crime scene investigator I overheard from the back of the ambulance, while I struggled to make sense of why someone had erected a large white canopy outside my front door. I refused to accept that Lucy was dead until Max entered my room at the hospital and confirmed the devastating news. But even now I've not come to terms with it. And the worst part is how they could believe that I am responsible. They claim to have found my bloody prints on the handle of the knife that inflicted the fatal wound, and her blood soaked into my pajamas. But what they seem unable to accept is that I could never hurt Lucy. I love her with all my heart, and wouldn't have been able to do any of the things they are accusing me of. I thought a person was innocent until proven guilty, but Detective Fay and his team appear to have attended a different school of thought. And I genuinely can't tell whether Max is just using the suggestion that I was sleepwalking when the crime occurred to buy more time to find the real killer, or whether there's a part of him that actually believes it. In the UK, a person who commits any offence whilst sleepwalking can be considered not guilty or legally insane if it can be proved the offence occurred while they were asleep. This is how Max explained it to me when he first proposed it as a defence at the plea hearing. I've asked him what he believes, and he always gives me the same answer. It doesn't matter what I believe, little brother, only what I can prove. Hardly the ringing endorsement I was hoping for. But then Max and I have never been that close. It was a relief when he volunteered to represent me when Fay arrested me for Lucy's murder within days of me being released from the hospital. They don't seem to care that I suffered a blow to the back of the head. the same night that Lucy and I were discovered in the kitchen, and that I have no recollection of what really happened. What's more logical? That I was sleepwalking, stabbed my wife to death, and somehow managed to knock myself unconscious? Or that someone broke into our home, knocked me unconscious, and murdered my wife? We're sitting against a railing that would do very little to stop anyone falling overboard. I'm not the strongest of swimmers, so any attempt to escape into the choppy, icy waters would fail before it began. And with the fog as thick as it is, it would be so easy to become lost anyway. Fahey doesn't speak. His cheeks an unnatural shade of green, but I've never been a fan of small talk anyway. What would we talk about? He's already warned me that he won't answer any questions about the investigation, and as far as he is concerned, he's caught his suspect. What troubles me most is the prospect that they're no longer looking for alternative suspects. Max returns, pocketing his phone and pulling his coat around him. I'd give anything for a hot drink to fight off the chill, but the Oldenburg doesn't have any refreshment facilities. I should get up and move about, but I don't want to give Fahey the wrong idea. Max has already told me not to do anything that might cast further suspicion, but it's almost as if he's also forgotten I'm an innocent party in all of this. I'm not sure either appreciate just how much I've lost. No, correction, just how much has been taken away from me. Lucy's body has yet to be released by the coroner, which means we've not been allowed to lay her to rest. How am I supposed to process my grief when I haven't had the chance to say goodbye? Although I was discovered beside her, my last memory of Lucy is of her laughing, so none of this feels real. And I would give anything to suddenly wake and for the nightmare to be over. "Shouldn't be too much longer," Max says, blowing warm air into his hands. "We should be able to see the island soon enough." 3 miles long and half a mile wide, Lundy Island lies off the coast of North Devon, where the Atlantic Ocean meets the Bristol Channel, and is a National Trust property. There are no hotels or lodgings available, according to the pamphlet, and the only method of transportation is the Oldenburg's twice-daily visit. Anyone who misses the crossing back will have to battle the elements, and at this time of year, it isn't something I'd want to face. The island is also the base for the Lundy Clinic of the Study of Sleep Disorders. Max has promised that they will be able to fully assess my mental state and predisposition to sleepwalking in less than a week. Again, this is going to be a waste of time, because they will conclude that I don't sleepwalk, which only serves to support my assertion that someone else killed Lucy. So what is Max really hoping is going to happen while I'm locked inside the clinic? All I can pray is that he has some master plan up his sleeve, and this week will buy him the time to implement it. The only way he could convince the judge was telling stories of when I sleepwalked as a child, stories I have no recollection of either. And I'm certain that if it is something that continues to affect me, then Lucy would have mentioned it. And I'm also sure that members of my various forces teams wouldn't have kept it a secret. Fahey stands suddenly, clutching his mouth, and tells us not to go anywhere, before hurrying towards the toilet sign. The fog is so thick here that Fahey disappears from sight before he's even made it to the door into the hull. The irony that a similar, impenetrable fog surrounds my own memory isn't lost on me. Why can't I remember what happened that night? The swelling to my head is gone, and I'm no longer suffering with the agonizing headaches, and yet the glaring hole remains. I overheard Max on the phone yesterday, asking one of the medical specialists whether the lack of memory could be as a result of disassociation, that I could have killed Lucy and been so shocked by my actions that my own psyche has wiped it from my mind, like someone deleting a file on a computer. When he caught me eavesdropping, he was quick to reassure me that he's simply playing devil's advocate, and trying to preempt what the prosecutors will ask. But the look on his face told me he's not totally convinced by my protestations. What chance have I got if I can't even convince my solicitor, my only brother, that I didn't do it? The boat rises and drops. My stomach turns. Looking over the side, I can't even see the water through the white shroud. But spray bounces up and catches my chin. The smell of salt and sewage is so pungent that I have to look away. "Planning your escape," Max murmurs beside me. I don't answer, shaking my head instead. "Nobody would blame you," he continues quietly, "given everything you're facing and what's happened." "I have no reason to run," I say firmly. "I didn't kill Lucy, and I'm going to prove it one way or another." He lights a cigarette and inhales deeply before offering me the packet. I shake my head, though I could do with something to take the edge off. I cough as his exhaled smoke blows into my face. He apologizes and stands, moving across to the other side of the ship, and leans over the railing. I'm so cold that I also stand and move about to try to get the blood pumping. I move to the front railing and try to peer through the fog in search of the island, but it's no good. There could be land a stone's throw ahead of us, and we wouldn't see it until too late. And then suddenly, there's a break in the dense swirl, and a dark shadow appears on the horizon. The boat begins to slow, and as the mist continues to disperse, the shadow begins to take shape. Spiky shards pierce the thick blanket of cloud, and as we near, the shadows take on hues of dark green and brown, as the scale of the large hilly mass becomes apparent. It's as if someone took a giant moss-covered rock and dropped it into the water. It's like something out of a horror movie, the kind of place that is probably very pleasant in the right conditions, but just looks sinister in low light. I can't escape the feeling that nothing good will come of this. Chapter 2. We head towards a long wooden pontoon cut into the water, and the boat begins to slow as we near. Fahey appears beside me, and he takes my wrist in his hand as if to remind me that I'm not a free man. He continues to hold on to my arm as the boat docks, and the other passengers head along the drawbridge to dry land. It is only when everyone else is off that we venture forwards. It feels as if I am being led somewhere from which there is no return. Whilst the rest of the passengers have headed towards the left of the pontoon, where a sign confirms the start of a marked trail around the island, we venture to the right, where a track leads up and around the hill directly in front of us. A man with a prematurely grey beard, dressed in a navy blue overcoat, is standing beside a large map stenciled into a placard of wood. He approaches Max and extends a hand. "You must be Max Meredith, right?" There's a Belfast twang to the bearded man's accent, and he gives me a serious frown as Max shakes his hand and introduces me and Fahey. He makes no effort to shake my hand, but there's no look of fear or concern behind his grey eyes. "My name is Stuart Coyle, and I am the facility director and clinical lead. I thought it only right to come down and meet you all personally. How is your crossing?" "Choppy," Max replies. "Is the clinic far?" "Only a 5-minute walk. I hope that's okay. There are no motor vehicles allowed on the island, so we either have to walk or run. The choice is yours." What kind of place prohibits motor vehicles? I can't escape the feeling that my living nightmare has taken a darker turn, and I'm being imprisoned here against my will. Coyle leads the way, Max beside him, and Fahey with an ever-watchful eye next to me. A more natural colour has returned to his cheeks now that we're on dry land, and I'm the one feeling sick to the gills. Is this what it feels like, being marched to the gallows? Have any of you been to Lundy Island before? Coyle asks. No, never, Max answers for all of us. Well, I'd offer to give you a whistle-stop tour, but there isn't much here, really. There's a small street of houses on the south side of the island for the 28 of us who call the island home. The majority of those work at our facility, whilst a handful of others run the bar and cafe for the visiting tourists. I catch sight of a monument as we pass, a bronze statue of a bearded figure in a cloak and hood, a cross in one hand, with the other pointing back out to sea. There is text etched on a tablet near the statue's feet, but when I try to read it, I realize it's written in Latin. For the souls of all who are lost, Coyle translates when he sees me reading it. This is St. Brendan the Navigator, Lundy's shrine to all those who've died traversing these rough waters, whether through sinking or misadventure. He looks at me directly as he says this, and the hairs on the back of my neck stand. I stare back out to sea, the mainland cut off by the thick wall of fog. I've never felt so isolated, and all I want to do is get back home, where Sienna is waiting for me. It's been too long since I spoke to her, and I promise myself that as soon as I'm settled, I'll find a phone and call her. I can't even begin to imagine what she's going through, with her mum gone, and now her dad ripped from her life. I know Lucy's sister Geraldine will do a great job of taking care of her, but she shouldn't have to. It should be me helping Sienna to process her grief, and her helping me. Maybe I should have instructed Max not to pursue this course of action. Maybe I should have just pleaded not guilty and allowed the judicial system to run its course. On the stand, I know I could convince a jury of how much I love Lucy. And if they could see how much pain I'm in, they'd see through Fahey's mistake. They'd see that I couldn't possibly have killed Lucy. At least then, I'd be at home and better able to support Sienna. Is it too late to tell all this to Max now? Surely he could reach the judge and advise that me being at this clinic is just a waste of everyone's time. The judge could then tear up the order that I be detained here for the next week, and we could get back to finding Lucy's real killer. Ultimately, that's what we're going to have to do when Coyle and his team conclude that I am not someone who sleepwalks. But I can't get to Max. He's several meters in front, in deep conversation with Coyle, and with Fahey, and I am struggling to keep pace with them. A greater gap is growing. "Hold on there," Fahey says, with more than just a hint of warning in his voice. "You might have convinced everyone else that you didn't stab your wife, but the evidence tells me a very different story. You can continue to lie to yourself, tell yourself that you didn't commit this heinous crime. But at some point, you're going to have to come to terms with what you did. And for the sake of your daughter, I hope that you realize the truth sooner rather than later. She deserves to know why her mum died, and she deserves a father who doesn't lie. I know now that there is nothing I'm going to be able to say or do to convince him of my innocence. As far as he is concerned, he's solved the case, and that means he won't even contemplate the possibility that someone else could have killed Lucy. If Max can't find the person responsible and somehow obtain their confession, I have no way of proving my innocence. Coyle continues to lead the way up and around the hill until we reach what looks like an abandoned hotel. It stands out against a blanket of thick cloud blocking out the sky. The paintwork is grey and weathered, and the windows on the front side are covered in grime. It looks like the sort of building they use in horror movies, devoid of any kind of life. If it wasn't for Coyle leading us here, I never would have guessed this is supposed to be a state-of-the-art facility. "Welcome to the Lundy Clinic," Coyle says, with a smile on his face that could belong to the devil himself. Chapter 3. It's only when we've entered through the automated doors that I finally accept we're in the right place. The reception area is the total opposite to the decrepit exterior. The carpet is a deep maroon colour and must be relatively new, as I can feel the bounce of the tread as I walk across it. The walls are clinically white, and there is a gentle hum of air conditioning. The place is so tall and airy, like we've walked into an airport lounge. I can almost picture suited pilots wheeling their cases along, with a smile on their faces and a twinkle in their eyes. The other thing that makes me think of an airport is the presence of 4 men in dark green shirts and trousers, carefully stationed at each corner of the room. The radios clipped to their belts and their athletic physiques mark them out as security, but it isn't yet clear to me whether they're a permanent fixture or have been drafted in because of me. The fact that there are no other patients or guests in the square room is also a red flag. Though it wouldn't surprise me if everyone is on high alert as a suspected murderer arrives. Although Max hasn't said it in so many words, I know it was he who arranged this stay and had to get the judge to agree to the assessment being carried out here. Just how much Stuart Coyle and the rest of the clinic team knows of this isn't yet clear, but given they'll be supplying their report to the judge, they must have some detail of what's happened. Coyle escorts us to an elongated counter that looks more like something I'd expect to see in a hotel. And even the woman behind the desk looks as though she stepped off a plane. Coyle speaks on our behalf and asks the receptionist to let Dr. Carpenter know that we've arrived. A moment later, a door to the right of the reception desk opens and a blonde woman in a pencil skirt and knitted jumper steps through. She can't be much older than 25. She straightens her white coat and walks towards us purposefully, her expression firm but welcoming. "May I introduce Dr. Carpenter?" Coyle says, stepping back and placing a protective arm behind her back. "She will be overseeing Jake's care while he's here with us." There are no nerves as she shakes hands with Fahey and Max. Then she looks straight at me, smiling amiably. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Jake." Her handshake is as sincere as the warmth emanating from her. Maybe I was wrong to assume they know the trouble I'm facing. "You will need to surrender any communication devices you're carrying on your person," Carpenter says calmly, accepting a plastic box from the receptionist. My mouth drops open. How will I phone Sienna without a phone? "My brother isn't in police custody at this time," Max interjects. "It's a requirement of the clinic that no recording devices are permitted through to the inner sanctum. It is for our patients' safety as much as our own. As a private medical facility, our clients' privacy and well-being is at the forefront at all times. Any personal items are stored in a secured room here at the entrance, and when his stay with us is complete, he'll be able to collect anything he's secured." "I need my phone," I say firmly. "I have a daughter I need to be able to speak to." "I understand," she says, offering a sincere nod. "But we can't allow you to bring the phone in with you. There is a telephone inside the facility, which patients can access to let loved ones know they are okay." "But she won't have that number. What if she needs to phone me? She has this number only." "Once you're settled in, you can call her and share the number of the facility. That way, if she needs to speak to you, she can phone here and we can pass on the message." She's not listening to me. I only agreed to come here knowing I'd be able to phone and message Sienna. I can't be cut off from her altogether. "Then I'm not staying," I say, taking a step back before feeling the weight of Fahey's hand against the small of my back. "Jake, you have to stay," Max says firmly but quietly. "You need to be assessed." I grab his arm and pull him away from the others, and he extends a hand to keep Fahey away from us. "Why are we doing this, Max?" I whisper. "We both know I didn't kill Lucy, and all you need to do is show the jury that someone else did." "We discussed this a long time ago, Jake. You're here so they can assess whether you sleepwalk. But I know that I don't. In fact, you're the only person in the entire world who believes I ever have. I promise you, there was a time when you used to sleepwalk on a regular basis. It used to freak out Mum. But I spoke to Mum, and she has no memory of it. I know, he exhales. I spoke to her too. But you have to remember, her memory isn't what it once was. She still occasionally forgets that Dad is dead. It breaks my heart whenever I speak to her and she tells me what Dad and her have been up to. Most of the time I don't correct her, as it upsets her to be reminded. I let out a deep sigh. I did not kill Lucy while sleepwalking, I say through gritted teeth. Then stay here and be assessed to prove that. I shouldn't need to prove it, Max. But as soon as I say the words, something clicks in my head. I'm not just here to buy Max time. He actually thinks I may have killed Lucy in my sleep. Your being here gives me another week to dig into yours and Lucy's lives before we return to court. That time could be invaluable if I'm able to find something, anything, that substantiates what you're saying. The police say nobody broke into the house because there was no forced entry. But have they considered someone else might have got hold of your keys? Or that maybe the front door wasn't locked? I need you here, Jake, so that I can do what is needed to find the truth about what happened that night. But I can't cope without being able to speak to Sienna. And how am I going to be able to check in with you and find out what you've discovered? Listen to me. I will speak to Sienna and let her know why you don't have your phone. And I will phone you here every day to provide updates on the case. Okay. And you'll give Geraldine the number for the facility so Sienna can phone me? Absolutely. I remove the phone from my pocket as we walk back over to the reception desk, and I turn it over in my hands several times before passing it to Dr. Carpenter. I promise you, it's the same rule for all our visitors. And considering we're looking to assess your sleeping patterns, the removal of distractions like social media and messenger apps will only benefit our assessment and potential treatments. After a few days, our other guests usually report they find it easier getting to sleep because they're not tied to their phones. Other guests, Fahey says, spittle forming on his lips. But Meredith will be isolated, right? Her lips curl slightly to one side. This isn't a prison, Detective Fahey. I am fully aware of Jake's circumstances, and if you're worried about the prospect of him trying to escape, I can assure you that we have an increased security presence as per your stipulations. In addition, every inch of the clinic is covered by video cameras. I'm half expecting Fahey to object and insist that he stay in the room with me. But before he has a chance, Coyle whisks him away towards one of the security guards, presumably to continue the conversation. If you want to follow me, Dr. Carpenter says, moving back towards the door, I'll show you to your room and fill you in on what you can expect while you're here with us. I look to Max to see whether he's planning to take off or tag along, and I'm relieved when he nods and ushers me to follow Dr. Carpenter. She scans the pass hanging from her neck, and the door beside the reception desk slides open with a whoosh. We find ourselves in a narrow, dimly lit corridor, the ceiling so low that Max almost needs to duck as we progress along it. Above our heads, there is no ceiling, just a glass roof, some 4 stories high. There are 8 closed doors, including the one we've just entered from, spread evenly around the walls. I imagine it would be easy to become disoriented. I can't escape the feeling we've stepped into some kind of labyrinth. Dr. Carpenter moves towards a door off to our right and again scans her pass against a panel. As before, the door slides open with a whoosh and we follow her through to another narrow corridor and into a much smaller enclosure. It's only when we're inside that I realize this is in fact a lift. We begin to ascend, though when the door slides open and we step out, there are no panels or numbers to indicate how high we have climbed. The walls here are as white as those in the reception area, and the air smells of sweet flowers. I feel some of the tension ease from my shoulders for the first time all day. I'm not sure what I was expecting the clinic to be like inside. Maybe some kind of insane asylum. But there are no bars on any of the large frosted windows that look into the rooms to the left and right of us. At the far end of this long corridor is a large red door, but rather than going through it, we stop halfway along, and Dr. Carpenter opens a door to one of the rooms. There is a bed covered with neatly pressed white linen against one of the walls, with an array of equipment either side of it. There are 2 soft leather chairs below a window that looks out over the island. I can see the sea, though the crashing waves are muted. This will be your room while you stay with us, Jake. This is the dorm floor, as we call it. You'll have seen the red door at the end of the corridor. The brown door beside it leads through to the butterfly room, which is the main communal area where guests can interact if they so choose. There are some board games, a radio, and a number of fiction books to read. The butterfly room is also where meals are served, though there's plenty of space, so don't feel you need to speak with other guests. Some suffer from lack of sleep, and so may be irritable, and others suffer from psychological comorbidities, so it's understood that you don't have to engage. I wasn't sure what to expect of this place, but this isn't it. I feel as though I've been checked into rehab against my will. You'll soon get the hang of things, she adds with a disarming smile, before turning to Max. Remember, the purpose of Jake's stay with us is to determine if he suffers from somnambulism. I frown. Better known as sleepwalking, she clarifies. She begins to explain the many different types of sleep disorder they study and treat, but I can't keep up with all the terminology. Please don't underestimate what we're capable of here. I can't go into too much detail, but some of the things we're currently studying would literally blow your mind. She smiles at her own joke. One of our most experienced nurses, Brenda, will be along with your hospital attire in due course. Max and I both raise our eyebrows at this. She laughs. Don't worry. There are no bottom-revealing hospital gowns here. We have special pajamas that contain sensors which allow us to monitor blood pressure, heart rate and the like, so we can see how different stimuli affect you both during the day and when you're asleep. And at the end of the week, you'll be able to reach a conclusive decision about whether he sleepwalks or not? Max asks. She nods. And can your equipment fail? He looks at me as he says this. Your findings could come under significant scrutiny and challenge in court. The equipment we use to assess patients is top of the line. Your brother isn't the first person we've assessed facing charges for this condition. We are very good at what we do here, Mr. Meredith. Something crashes into the open door of my room, and we all start. A woman in a white uniform and checkered tabard wheels what looks like an old tea trolley into the room. She has the look of someone who's seen and heard it all, and can no longer be surprised by anything. She's hunched over the trolley, her back and shoulders now rounded by time and service. Ah, and here is Brenda now. Brenda, may I introduce our latest guest? This is Jake Meredith, and his brother, Max. And that is my cue to leave, so you can get changed and settled. Brenda will be your first point of call from here on in. Oh, I thought Mr. Coyle said you would be overseeing me, I say, confused by this change. Dr. Carpenter deals with all the head stuff, but I'll look after your day-to-day needs, Brenda interjects. Her Welsh accent is strong, but I sense she's toned it down so it's easier to understand. She puffs out her cheeks and wipes her forehead with the back of her wrist. Her hair is thick with greying curls, and the large glasses cover most of her cheeks and temple. She reminds me of a childminder Max and I had when we were kids, who we referred to as Auntie Roz, even though she wasn't family. Brenda puts an affectionate arm around Dr. Carpenter. She's brilliant at her job, but lousy at making beds and cleaning bathrooms. They laugh before Dr. Carpenter takes her leave. Brenda moves to a door at the far side of the room that I hadn't noticed before, opens it, and reveals a toilet, basin, and walk-in shower. Again, it's all in brilliant white, which is beginning to make my eyes ache. There are towels hanging behind the door, but just shout if you need any more, she adds, returning to the trolley and lifting out a transparent plastic pouch. If you can get changed into these, I'll give you a tour of the rest of the clinic. She shows Max out of the room and closes the door. I was told not to bring anything with me, and that all my needs would be dealt with. But I pull out one thing I snuck in from my pocket. It's a photo of Sienna and Lucy, laughing while on a spinning teacup ride from a fun fair. I remember the day so well. We ate chips out of paper bags while we huddled together on the end of Teignmouth Pier. One way or another, I won't stop until I've proved my innocence and get back to my little girl. Losing one parent at such a young age isn't fair, and I won't let her lose another. Chapter 4. 4 weeks before the murder. Jake starts awake, the drumming in his ears unbearably loud. He blinks several times, trying to place the noise and khaki-coloured wall of a jet plane. He turns to look out of the tiny porthole-sized window behind his head and sees the grey of runway behind him, but for a moment can't tell if they're about to take off or a landing. The inside of the cabin rattles as the plane continues to roll, and he sees they are no longer taxiing towards the runways, but away from them. And then the realization that he's home, returning from serving for the final time, hits him, and he can't keep the smile from breaking across his face. Any minute now, he'll be off the plane and back in Lucy and Sienna's arms. His heart throbs with excitement. He looks around the cabin and spots the faces of another 6 men chattering excitedly. He recognizes one of them, but none are from his platoon. "We're home!" one of them yells at the top of his voice, and everyone else on board cheers and whoops. Jake has always told Sienna that being away from home and family while on deployment is the toughest part of his job. But returning always makes it feel worthwhile. Jake cannot wait to kiss Lucy and tell her how much he's missed her, but he's also terrified that he'll barely recognize Sienna, because kids grow so quickly and change so much at that age. Lucy has been sending him photos of the two of them, but it isn't the same. He reaches down to the sports bag between his feet and pulls out the stuffed camel toy he brought back for Sienna and smooths out its fur where it's become crumpled in the bag. He then reaches below that and pulls out the long, thin jewelry box, snapping open the lid and adjusting the chain of the silver necklace and pendant. He's put pictures of himself and Sienna inside, so that Lucy will always have them close to her heart. He's hoping it serves as a distraction when he breaks the news that he's resigned his commission and is officially unemployed. He knows she won't be happy to assume the role of sole breadwinner, but he doesn't intend to remain unemployed for long. He's worked out that they'll survive financially for at least 2 months, but wants to find something sooner rather than later. A smarter move would have been to delay handing in his resignation, but after what happened, not what everyone thinks happened, but what really happened, he doesn't want to risk staying any longer. Disembarking, he can feel the adrenaline pumping around his body as the cool wind blows against his face. It's good to be home after 3 months in the heat of the desert. Even the splashes of rain against his cheeks are welcome. He passes through security and immediately spots the huge cardboard sign being held lopsided by Sienna. "Welcome home, Daddy." He runs and scoops her into his arms, the sign quickly discarded to the floor as Sienna throws her tiny arms around his neck. She smells of vanilla and strawberries, but he buries his face in the crook between her neck and her shoulder. "I've missed you so much, Pumpkin." He can feel the warmth of her tears as they trickle onto his cheek. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, sweetheart." He pulls her back so he can look into her beautiful, innocent eyes. He dries her tears with his thumb and smiles warmly at her. "Thank you for my sign. Did you make it yourself?"
"Mummy helped spell the words."
He looks to Lucy and takes Sienna's hand into his so he can use his left to pull Lucy towards him. The kiss is hard and passionate because he wants her to know how much he's missed her too. She reciprocates, and it pushes any lingering memory of what happened in the desert out of his mind. Sienna groans in morbid horror as they continue to kiss, and squirms until they break apart. Home is a 3-hour drive from Wattisham Airfield, during which Sienna tells him all about school and how she's really enjoying it. He doesn't interrupt, cherishing every moment, and it isn't until he recognizes the road they're driving along that he realizes something isn't right. "What are we doing here?" he asks, still feeling pretty drained and desperate to have a shower and change out of his army fatigues. Lucy looks over at him and makes an apologetic face. "Sorry, I just need to pick up a few papers from Geraldine's. I'm in court in the morning, and I asked her to take a look at my documents. 4 eyes are better than 2 and all that." She parks on the side of the road. "Don't be too long," he says, flashing her the grin he knows she can't resist. "I thought we could get home, put Sienna to bed, and then maybe you and I could, have an early night as well." He lifts her hand to his lips and kisses the back of it. She flashes that smile of hers, and he's putty in her hands. "I won't be long. Why don't you come in too? I'm sure Ray would love to see you." Jake wrinkles his nose in revulsion at mention of his golf-loving brother-in-law. "I don't want to see Ray. He'll start talking golf at me, which you know I can't stand, and then he'll try and pressure me into going to the driving range with him." She chuckles, not realizing he's being serious. "He's not that bad. Just come in with me. I'm sure a beer will make things easier." Jake shakes his head. "I've been travelling for 8 hours. I'm in dirty clothes, and I just don't have it in me to be sociable with anyone right now. I'll wait in the car." "Please? I might be 20 minutes or so going over any revisions with Geraldine." "Please?" "Yeah, come on, Daddy. I can introduce you to Auntie Geraldine's cat." They've ambushed him, and a flash of memory of the platoon being attacked pricks his mind's eye. On that day, he swore he would do anything to be back with them, and his resistance weakens. "Okay, but 1 beer, and then we're on our way. Agreed?" Lucy smiles again and climbs out. Jake pushes open his door and follows suit, hanging back to help Sienna out before following them up to the front door. As he's standing on the doorstep, he happens to glance over his shoulder, suddenly conscious of just how many cars appeared to be parked along the street. His brain connects the dots just as the door opens, and he sees familiar faces gathered just inside. He inwardly groans when he sees the Welcome Home Hero banner hanging between the lampshades in the expansive hallway, before a chorus of "Surprise!" rises from those gathered inside. He wants to grab Lucy and Sienna's hands and drag them back to the car, but it's already too late. He's grateful that so many people have decided to come out, but desperately wishes they hadn't bothered. Given everything that's happened in the last few weeks, a party isn't appropriate. If they had any idea of what he did over there. He chases the thought away, plasters on a smile he's in no way feeling, and follows Lucy inside. There are pats on the back, warm hugs, and messages of congratulations. It's overwhelming. It looks as though Lucy and Geraldine have been busy planning this for weeks. The dining table is filled with finger foods, and the sideboard is stacked with bottles of wine and spirits. He can't believe so much effort has been made for him. His stomach grumbles as he smells the steaming pizza that's just been carried to the table by Ray. He waves as their eyes meet, reaching into his back pocket and passing Jake a bottle of beer, quickly apologizing because he forgot to bring a bottle opener and disappearing back out to the kitchen. "A hero's welcome," Max's deep brogue mutters right before he slaps a hand on the back of Jake's shoulder. "Welcome home, little brother." Jake turns, surprised Lucy managed to get him to come along. The last time they spoke, bitter words were exchanged, and although their mum has been on at them to clear the air, between Max's busy lifestyle and Jake's deployments, they've left things to fester. "Hey, how's tricks?" Jake asks, uncertain what else to say. "Couldn't be better. But my exploits in the criminal justice system pale against your heroism overseas. Mum hasn't stopped telling everyone she knows how her baby is being awarded the Victoria Cross for gallantry in the face of the enemy." He raises his glass of wine in a toast. "Congratulations." Jake clinks the unopened beer bottle against the tip of the glass. "Thanks, but I only did what anyone would in my position. Mum says she wasn't certain why it is being awarded. Are you able to enlighten us?" He now spots his sister-in-law, Katerina, standing just behind his brother. "It's highly confidential. I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you," he jokes. It isn't true, but he isn't prepared to tell anyone what really happened out in that desert. Being awarded the VC has blown everything out of the water, and as grateful as he is to be recognized, being allowed to return early from deployment is the only reward he wanted. "What if I promise not to tell anyone?" Max presses. "I'm good at keeping secrets." Isn't that the truth? Jake thinks, but doesn't say. He's relieved when Ray returns, now wielding a bottle opener, reaching for the neck of the bottle and popping off the small metal cap. "Would you mind if I borrowed the hero of the hour?" Ray asks, placing a hand on Jake's shoulder and leading him away. "There's something I want to show you," he whispers, as they cross through the room and towards the kitchen. But they don't stop there, continuing through the internal door and out to his garage. He flicks on the light, and both cough as the dust is disturbed. "What do you think?" he asks, his eyes wide with excitement. Jake looks around the garage, littered with offcuts of wood, but all he can see is Ray's bag of golf clubs beneath the light. Jake winces when he sees the large red bow wrapped around the top of it. "I decided to treat myself to some new clubs, and I was going to sell my old ones on, but then when Lucy said you were coming back and would use some leave, I thought..." His cheeks bristle excitedly. "I know you two don't have a heap of disposable cash, so I'd be honoured if you would accept them as a gift from Geraldine and me." I don't know what to say, Ray," he answers honestly. Ray slaps him hard on the back. "I knew you'd be speechless. I thought it might be an idea for us to take them to the driving range later in the week, so you can get a feel for them, and then we can start with a 9-hole and slowly build up to an 18. Jake hands him the bottle of beer, excusing himself as he races out of the garage and towards the downstairs toilet, closing and locking it behind him. Whilst he appreciates the effort Lucy has gone to, she knows how much he hates surprises and being the centre of attention. If she'd let on sooner, he would have told her how physically exhausted he feels. He desperately twists the taps, willing the water to run, staring back at his pallid reflection in the mirror above the sink. His heart is racing so fast that he thinks he may pass out at any moment. He doesn't know what's happening to him, but is terrified he's having a heart attack. Chapter 5. I stand, feeling the thin cotton pyjama top and bottoms tight against my skin. The label on the packet they came in claims there are tiny sensors secreted within the material able to measure heart rate, pulse, and blood pressure. And it makes me wonder just how much my stay here is costing, and who's footing the bill. Max and I haven't discussed his fee for helping me, but I know my brother well enough to realize he isn't acting pro bono. There will be a cost at some point. And frankly, if he keeps me out of jail, I'll pay whatever it is. Fresh flowers stand in a shapely glass vase on the windowsill, reminding me of the days when Mum would do the laundry when we were growing up. She was always testing new detergent scents. Whenever there'd be a television commercial for a new brand or fragrance of washing liquid or tablet, she'd be out buying it the next day. Our home always smelled of fresh flowers and the great outdoors. I wish she was here right now to hold me close and tell me everything is going to be okay. I bury the negativity of my thoughts with a firm shake of my head. I know I am innocent, and the British justice system is designed to try and punish the guilty. I have to keep believing that an innocent man won't go to prison.